Elite quarterbacks are transferring at a 60% rate. I give you 3 reasons why on the portal.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the portal. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making the portal your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Quarterbacks are transferring at a 60% clip, and here are the 3 main reasons why. The easy one, playing time. We all know that. That's the easy one you can just throw out there, no problem. Secondarily, this is the one that fans don't want to hear. Players pick coaches, not schools, as a general rule. So even if you get a guy there, if your coach is poached by the National Football League, if another school hires him as a coordinator or maybe a head coach, that player oftentimes will leave or even follow that coach. But the third one, and the one that probably won't surprise you, is also the most complex. Name, image, and likeness. That is the biggest reason there is an extra amount of players leaving. Give or take 40 to 50% of quarterbacks have been leaving their program since the 1980s. A buddy of mine studies this, and he's went through a roster over 40 years. It's literally like almost on the dot, 45 to 50%, even through like 5 to 10-year clips. Pretty high. But we've reached 60%. And NIL is the reason. And if you're watching this on YouTube, maybe you found this particular podcast scrolling, I used the thumbnail for one Quinn Ewers when he was at Ohio State. Don't forget, he originally skipped his senior high school, went to the Buckeyes, and got a big $1 million check in Ohio. Texas at that point didn't have name, image, and likeness for high school athletes. So he went up, took the money. Can't say I really blame him. But then he transferred back down to Austin to play for Texas, where most people thought he was going to go at one point anyway. And that was that. So he transferred too. But I'm going to break down a few points. But here are the main things you need to know. When I say elite quarterbacks, I'm talking about top 5 guys. Pete Nakos of On3 put out a tweet recently saying that 60% of the quarterbacks in the top 10 of the On3 rankings from 21, 22, and 23 left. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do a little research of my own. I'm going to condense it. We're going to go top 5 quarterbacks. I'm going to use 24/7 Sports, just another barometer. Look at the top 5 guys for them, same years. Let's go through and see if the truly elite guys matched. And out of the 15 guys, 5 players out of each class, 9 of the 15 left. Exactly 60%. So here they are. Quinn Ewers, as I mentioned, number 1 player in the country out of South Lake Carroll, just on the northwest side of Dallas, goes to Ohio State, transfers to Texas. Caleb Williams, Gonzaga High School, famous program in D.C., signs with the University of Oklahoma. Obviously, he follows his coach out to USC. So the first 2 guys at 21 left. So right off the bat, it's boom, boom. 2 top 10 players. 24/7 had Caleb number 8. Sam Ewert, part of the Ewert family, famous quarterback family in the state of Washington. He's been all over the map. He was a number 23 player, played at Kennedy Catholic up there in Washington. He's played at Washington, Cal Poly, Utah, and now he's at Cal. That is a wild ride. 4 schools for Sam. The final 2, only one of them stuck it out. But he did decommit from the school he was originally committed to. Drake May played at Myers Park in Charlotte. He committed to Saban and Bama, but he didn't sign with them. He did end up signing with UNC, and Mac Brown redshirted, played 2 years, and obviously headed to the NFL. He's been extremely successful. He was number 24. Number 34, Brock Vandergrift. This is a kid that I went and watched. He was an elite player, but he just never adjusted to the complexity of the college passing game and all the defenses. He was a backup for his career during his time at Georgia, gets his degree, transfers to Kentucky. So 4 out of the first 5 guys, the only one, Drake May, in 2021 from the 2021 group, 4 out of 5 for 247 left. That's 80% actually. 2022, these are some guys that are potentially going to lead their teams into the playoffs again. Drew Auer was the number 3 player. He's from Medina, Ohio, signed with Penn State. Cade Klubnik, Westlake High School in Texas. He was originally in the same class with Ewers, but Ewers dropped back. And that was it. He was done a year early. Klubnik signed with Clemson. He was number 13 player. He's still there. He'll be one of the Heisman front runners this next year. Also from Texas, number 22 player, Connor Weigman from Bridgeland High School on the northwest side of Houston, goes to play for the Aggies. He's had an injury-plagued career. He just transferred to Houston. So that's the first guy in that class. Ty Simpson, he stuck it out. Maybe or maybe not. He will be Bama's quarterback this next year. He's at Westview High School in Martin, Tennessee. He was an elite quarterback. Some people had him as 5-star. He's the number 29 player by 24/7 in the 22 class. And then another guy that is now on the move. This is a wild ride. Devin Brown, Draper, Utah, Corner Canyon. A lot of people, myself included, thought this was going to be a really, really good football player. Number 44 player by 24/7. He's going to transfer to Cal. By the way, I messed that up. Heward is going to Southern Cal, not Cal. Brown is going to Cal. It's just crazy because so many of these guys we were really sure were going to be good. Doesn't always mean it's going to work out that way. NIL, let's go through a few more players, and then we're going to talk about the NIL impact of this and why it's the biggest reason for that extra 10% jump. Arch Manning in 23, most services had him number 1. Isidore Newman, same program that his uncles played at. He comes out of New Orleans, signs with the University of Texas. I'd heard numbers of $10 million for him to go to UT at that point. Obviously, his family name helped with that, but truly an elite program. He's the next guy up for the Horns. Nico Iamaleava, he's out of Downey, California, played at Warren High School. He got a huge NIL deal to go play for the Vols. Obviously, that whole lawsuit deal. He's still with Tennessee, but again, huge deal. He's got no reason to go anywhere. He's playing, so he's there. The one that's really unique is Dante Moore, committed to Oregon, and at the last minute decides to flip to UCLA. They gave him a better deal. I don't know the particulars. Plays there for a year, played some as a freshman, even started a game or two. But then the kid out of Detroit, Martin Luther King, great guy, by the way, he transferred back to the school he originally committed to, Oregon. He set out this past season. He's expected to be the Ducks quarterback number 1. He was the number 4 player. Arch was 1, Nico was 2. So 3 out of the top 4 players in the 23 class were quarterbacks. Jackson Arnold, number 10 for 24/7. Denton Geyer, great program. I remember going to see him at his high school. Saw him in the LA finals for the Elite 11. The Elite 11 named him the number 1 guy. He signed with Oklahoma, but he just transferred to Auburn. And then finally, Malachi Nelson. This is another kid I saw at the Elite 11 finals that year. Was really good. Local kid out of Los Alamitos, prominent program for decades in LA. He signs with USC. Doesn't work. Next year goes to Boise, and now he's on the move again to UTEP. So it's not that easy. Overall, again, 9 out of the 15 players, 9 out of 15 left. Playing time is the big one that never changes. It's the steadfast. The coaches are part of it too. Kids pick schools sometimes, but it's pretty rare. More often than not, they pick the coach. But again, the final piece of the puzzle here, because that number's hovered 50% for a long time, and now it's up to 60%, is NIL. When we come back, we're going to discuss how that can help your program, or sometimes that can hurt. That is next here on The Portal. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert, comedy, football game, baseball game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the work for you, curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Gametime Picks for a while now, and here's why I love it. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat. Couldn't believe the value. It's a steal. And the best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, go ahead, get your refund. It's 110% of the difference with Gametime. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to take your event to the next level? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Football is in a new era with the NIL, and we've seen guys go and leave places for just a gazillion different reasons. So I want to circle back to the situation that we were talking about at the very beginning of the show, Quinn Ewers. When Quinn went to the University of Texas, it's after the state of Texas, from a legislating body, had approved some things differently with NIL. Basically, let's just cut to the chase. People that were in the state's infrastructure and government were probably going to get voted out if they started losing more recruits, because they don't want Ohio State coming in there and grabbing guys. State of Ohio allowed it, but they didn't. That was the end of that. They got it. So he transferred back. So you can lose them and gain them, even with the same player. That's about as wild as it's going to get. We may never really see something like that, because most states that have big-time high school football now have some form of it. There are some exceptions. Like, I live in Alabama, and Alabama's pretty conservative. I don't know if that's going to change, but they could lose more kids than they used to, and they have over the last couple of years. If it gets really crazy, though, and they start losing more and more players, I bet you suddenly that'll change in Alabama too. But I digress. The point is still the same. How does NIL, name, image, and likeness, impact your program? No matter what school you root for, no matter how you look at NIL, it is here to stay in some capacity. Here are 3 things to know moving forward about it. Just because you sign a guy, that contract and all the details that, quite frankly, the public, at least right now, doesn't have any privy information to, that's the most important thing. So we're guessing. We can say we're not, but we're guessing. Is it upfront money? In other words, if a guy gets $1 million deal, well, how's the settlement with that if he breaks out of it in some capacity? In other words, if it's for the length of his time at school X, let's say he goes to Utah, that's $250K a year. Well, what if he transfers after year 2? All those little bylines and stuff matter. It can even tick off a kid. It can cause other problems at the school he's from. It is super complex. That's point 1. No, when kids leave, there can be all kinds of things that they left for. Maybe there was disagreement about getting a pay raise because he played really well as a sophomore, but he's under contract. That's point 1. Point 2, let's go back to that mention of upfront money. Fewer and fewer schools are giving out upfront money. Why? Because you get hosed. Not going to go into specifics with players, but I know of a handful of kids that got sickening money, won $500,000, and then didn't even sign with the school. There's going to be a lot less of that. Well, I can't say I blame the schools for that, but at that same point, you got to ask yourself, is it better to go ahead and losing now because another school, desperate maybe, offers that same player, maybe not as much overall, but they offer X amount up front that's way more than the school you root for? These are really difficult things to think about with NIL. Quarterbacks in particular, this happens because if you're not good at quarterback, you are in a world of hurt. And then third and finally, it's the structuring with it. When you talk about the house settlement that's getting ready to come in, and that's 50 podcasts in one. That's going to be like March, April. There's going to be more discussion. What is the house settlement? It's Congress involved. And of course, Congress is a mess all the time. If you follow politics at all, that's an entity I have very little faith in. But the number that's been bandied about is $22 million per university's athletic department. Part of that will go to football, probably the majority for like an SEC, Big Ten school, Notre Dame, maybe a school like Florida State. But it's still negotiations, and there can be still lawsuits because Title IX is always the fly in the ointment. There's already been people talking about that. So it is extremely complex. Keep in mind, with your quarterback in particular, these are the things that are going to come up, and it can happen with a left guard too. NIL is the additional reason that more quarterbacks are transferring. And if you want to really get into it, probably if I researched it, the number at other positions is probably pretty darn high too. O-linemen, for instance, probably transfer at the lowest rate. For whatever the reason, historically, they're a little more loyal. They'll get their degree and they'll move on, or they'll get their degree, then if they've got a year of eligibility from a redshirt season, they'll transfer to another institution. Fair enough. But quarterback, it's always been volatile, but it's even up 10% with NIL. And here's my last point with it. At some point with this house settlement, somebody's going to make an offer, and who knows if these are going to be made public, but the bodies that are considered to be NIL collectives at whatever school, that information is aside. The school will give a kid something, but the kicker is they can still help them at least set up with these collectives as well. We're never going to know the total number exactly, but at least we can hear. You're going to start hearing about numbers of $5 to $10 million for elite quarterbacks. That may be not out of high school, but I'm talking about if you really want to win. Look at Ohio State's roster this past year. That's a really big reason for this. And remember now, Ohio State did that right after Michigan won the national championship. They weren't happy. They ended up going through their athletic budget year at a negative $30+ million. A lot of that is because of the NIL, I'm sure of it, because they had an incredible roster this past season, but they did get a national title. So how much is the next elite quarterback? A Quinn Ewers, an Arch Manning out of high school? That's hard to say because, again, the House settlement's coming along, but it's complex. And do not forget, with the new situations that are coming out with the House settlement, in addition to the NIL collectives, and by the way, that settlement with Tennessee, the state of Virginia, and the University of Tennessee, all of that, collectives are still going to be able to do business in addition to what the House settlement ends up being. So the money's going to be crazy. There's going to be some numbers for these quarterbacks that really gets crazy. Again, my bottom end projection, we're going to hear $5 million from some guys consistently. And I know the whole Bryce Underwood thing is kind of an exception, but I'm talking about a consistent time of we're going to get to $5 million. It may grow over time too, but we're going to see $5 million for some of these kids, even if it takes a year or so. Maybe they get $2 million to sign, and if they just do the right things, meet with the right boosters, go to the right clubs, and talk to kids and do all the things to make the university look good. There's signing bonus for that, doing all those things. We'll get them to $5 million after the first year. They just want them to be responsible. That's how I would do it, at least. We'll see what the schools do. Speaking of the University of Michigan, next up, we're going to talk about their recruiting class because their 2025 class added an elite player yesterday, and it's an underrated class, even though the University of Michigan signed a top 10 class. That is next here on the portal. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. Over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. Pick one or less on at least two players' projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick, and you're cashing out. Here's an example. This week, I'm looking at the board and selecting Travis Kelce. I think it's pretty good bet that Travis is going to get a lot of targets and more for a quarterback's passing yardage. What's the best part? Fast, safe withdrawals. And when you win, cash is in the account in as little as 15 minutes. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie Winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. The University of Michigan football program started really slow this year. I think we could all agree to that. But they finished strong. They beat Michigan, and they finished really strong in recruiting too. And that's a really important thing to note. When Michigan won it in 23, they beat you up. Here we come. Try and stop us. D-line was really good too, but it was about the trenches. And yesterday, they got another guy that has NFL potential. Ty Haywood out of Ryan High School in Denton, Texas, the biggest name to sign on the second National Signing Day, picked the Wolverines as expected. But this is something that you should think about from a long-term perspective. As noted earlier in the show, we talked about Bryce Underwood, arguably the best player in the country and a kid that I thought was just an incredible talent when I saw him at a 7-on-7 event last year. This is a young man that needs guys to block for him. This is a team sport. But not only is he getting guys to block for him, he's got Haywood. That's a great one. But he's also got Andrew Babaloa out of the Kansas City area, who may be even better. Both kids just under 300 pounds and extremely athletic. And then the other kid that I love is Avery Gotch. He's a 4-star offensive lineman, could play tackle. But with those two big guys, maybe they move him inside. I think they have 3 NFL linemen in one recruiting class. Props to the entire Michigan organization for doing that well. It's not easy to get an offensive line class like that to kind of bolster your team no matter how you do it. But with the way Michigan tries to formulate their game plans, this bodes well with or without Bryce, and obviously he's going to be good. Here are 3 more guys that I think, among many, in that recruiting class that make it underrated. And these are guys that I've been around or seen their film, etc. I'll go into detail here. Donovan Johnson, running back from IMG, elite player. He's only a 3-star, though. Why is that? He had a knee injury, and then he came back and had another good year. If he is as healthy as I think he is the steal of the class. He was going to be a top 5 running back by all projections before his knee injury. He's over 200 pounds, built like a Greek god, great kid. And he's going to Michigan in a downhill offense. Donovan's from Savannah, Georgia, and he fits the profile of Michigan's offense to a T. With that offensive line that they're building, and they got some good offensive tackles in the 24 class too. Do not forget that. If they have the kind of offensive line that I think they're going to have, Michigan, with Bryce Underwood under center in 2025, a little bit at least, maybe he ends up the year as a starter, and definitely in 26, is going to start to make waves again. Ohio State better beat Michigan this next year. If they don't, it's going to get really tough. Here are 2 more guys to think about. Now, we've talked about Michigan being a power football team today, but you got to throw the ball better. With Bryce, it's going to be a little easier to recruit receivers. They've got like 3 guys, big body guys coming in, but the one in particular that's important is out of Katy, Texas, on the west side of Houston. Jordan High School, Andrew Marsh. This is a kid. I love his film. 24/7 has him as a top 100 recruit. It's justified. He can really run. He can change directions. Been coached well. Looks like a natural receiver. If Michigan has a deep threat to go with arguably the most gifted quarterback in this class physically, I mean, if you haven't seen Bryce Underwood's film, by the way, go look him up on Huddle. It's worth your time. If you give them a deep threat and you got Donovan in the backfield and you've got that offensive line, you're already off to a fantastic start. And then finally, Wu, a kid that I think is one of the best natural players just playing football, forget positions and all that, in college football over the next 4 years will be him. Michigan will find a way to use him. I don't know if he's going to play will linebacker, overhang. He'll be a special teams demon. Nathaniel Owusu-Koramoah. This is a really good player. I just screwed up the name again. I apologize. Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, his brother, Koramoah, that played in Notre Dame, then with Cleveland Browns, have been super successful. Nathaniel is a great kid, and he has a training mission that is incredible from play to play. He doesn't really care what's going on around him. His job is to seek and destroy. Even before a game or before practice, if you go to IMG, you would see him out there doing all the things that you need him to do to be locked in. He would warm up by himself when it's 100 degrees out there. And then they would go through the routine. I knew he was good, but the day that I was there last to see them practice, I'm like, is that Wu? And he was out there practicing, just stretching, going through some short drills, some short shuttle, doing everything that an elite player should do. I think he's going to be a great player in the Michigan uniform, and Michigan fans are quite honestly going to love having him out there on the field. Thank you again for making the portal your number 1 listen each and every day. If you have not already, hit that notification bell, that like button. Make sure you subscribe and share this podcast. Going to be talking about recruits around the country, quarterbacks, receivers, running backs, commitments, what's next with official visits, you name it. We're going to talk about it here on the portal, and NIL will always be a discussion point. And finally, the portal itself, as in the transfer portal, absolutely. That is something that will be discussed heavily here on this channel. So once again, make sure you subscribe. I will talk to you again soon. Take care.